Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is only a few weeks away. I've been rewatching the Indiana Jones films and I was actually pretty shocked by how many things that the game does that I saw during my preview that are straight out of the films. So here's some gameplay details I think you'll appreciate. Let's go! Let me know, are you excited for Indiana Jones later this year?
Hey guys, just a quick update. The video you're about to see was actually recorded before I left for London and that gameplay deep dive actually went out. So everything in this video is still 100% accurate. It's just based on my preview thoughts, not new thoughts from the gameplay deep dive. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. All right, roll it.
We'll start with the iconic whip as it's the most iconic thing. What is also interesting about rewatching Raiders of the Lost Ark, by the way, is just how iconic Indiana Jones is like right from the start. And fun fact, they didn't actually think this was a franchise originally, and it was originally just titled Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, how can you look at Harrison Ford and the whip and the hat and not think this is a franchise? I don't know. Anyway, but the whip. So in the game, you will use the whip to do a ton of things, really. I think one of the most interesting is that it's basically like a grappling hook. You can use it to swing across gaps or use it to hook at the top of things and like climb up. And I like straight up just thought this was video games nonsense because it is video game nonsense, to be honest, but it actually does this in the films. Like, he will use it as a swing or it'll just somehow become a grappling hook and like a latch onto things, and he'll use it to pull himself onto things. And I don't know how physics work, I guess, but apparently that's how whips work, and you can just grapple hook it onto things or you can use it as anything you like. In the games as well, it is used in combat just like he does in the films. You can use it to whip enemies in the hand to knock their weapon out of their hand. We do see him do that. You can whip their face for a brief stun, and you can also whip their legs to like hook it around them and trip them and then pull them towards you, which I quite like from a combat perspective, to pull enemies around and like manipulate them. You can also use it to whip objects in the environment to create noise, which is something that I learned as well while at the preview. We don't have any footage of this because all the footage we were provided was provided by Bethesda. We weren't allowed to capture our own, but you could say whip a bottle and the bottle would shatter, which would create noise to trigger enemies to go over in that direction. So a lot of uses for that good old whip. Indiana Jones isn't a born fighter, and the fights in the films are quite, shall we say, chaotic. Like, they're just not very clean in terms of their choreography, and I think that's pretty well reflected in the games. Like, combat in the preview was quite fun, but it is heavily melee focused with a lot of melee weapons and like smacking enemies, and it has a bit of that sort of grungy or messy combat that you would expect from someone like an Indiana Jones who's not a born fighter and is just doing the best he can to get by. And this is reflected in the gameplay where you can pick up melee weapons and just smack enemies with them, and the melee weapons will break and you might need to find more or just use those trusty old fists. But you can always pull out your revolver and whip as well. But I did really appreciate the gun pickups in the preview as well. Like, you pick up guns, have limited bullets, but the best part is that when you run out of bullets, you can flip it around and smack them with the butt of the gun. I did quite like doing that, and that is straight out of the films as well. He does smack people around sometimes with guns, but I think overall it feels quite authentic to what Indiana Jones is in those fights that you do see in the films. And something that I wanted to touch on here that isn't in the films is the whole progression and like skill books thing. Now, I did talk about this extensively in my preview, and I don't want to rehash all of that conversation here, but I wanted to use this as a prefix to talk about the fact that Indy finds things very often, and you're picking up notes and books and things that give you clues about the overall story, what's happening. And this is all reflected in the game with all of the side missions and clues and artifacts, things you can pick up, but also with the skill books in that you can pick them up to learn new skills. I think the most like film skill would probably have to be the survival skill Lucky Hat. So what Lucky Hat does is it allows you to revive yourself once. If you die and you get knocked down, you're like prone, and you can crawl over to your hat, dust it off, pick it up, put it back on, and away you go. I really like that. And that feels very video gamey again, but also true to what Indiana Jones is in the films in a way. Like, you always have that trusty hat around him, and he does like often almost lose it, just manage to save the old hat. But there are other skills linked to everything from like your fitness, your HP, and your stamina upgrades, which Indy does have a stamina bar, which is used when you climb or you sprint or you punch or you whip, basically anything that might typically use stamina. And this is reflective in the fact that Indiana Jones isn't really a superhero. Like, when I was playing the preview build and I was climbing around the Vatican outskirts, I actually like almost ran out of stamina just trying to climb up this ledge, and I was just able to make it before my stamina ran out. And even outside of that, like, Indiana Jones is often out of breath and he's like panting and weaving, and it's a tough gig, obviously, being an archaeologist, and you can see that reflected in the game just like it is in the films. I never really thought about it until I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark, but Indiana Jones does do some rudimentary stealth in the movies, and the main way that he does this is via disguises, where he essentially hides in plain sight. And this felt felt, again, like a video game feature, but this is, again, straight out of the films. So in a few of the films, Indiana Jones can grab disguises that he can wear and will use them to sneak through the camps to find whatever the MacGuffin thing that he needs to find. And this is exactly the same in the games. We didn't get footage of this when we were given our preview footage, but I did actually do this in the Geyser section. I was able to get a worker's disguise and put that on, and I was able to walk through the camp basically freely as much as I liked. The one thing to point out is that captains will still notice you, like they'll recognize that you probably shouldn't be there, but basically all the grunt guards won't notice you. But if you do things that are suspicious, like if you steal their goods, then they will absolutely notice that you shouldn't be there. There was one instance as well where I was trying to find an item in this interior area, and there were some guards that were just like playing poker or something on a table, and because I was dressed as a worker, the captain or someone that was sitting down was like he clicked his fingers like, hey, can you like get me a drink? And if I didn't get him the drink, like soon enough he would get suspicious of me, so I ran over there and I grabbed the drink and gave him the drink. So he was none the wiser and I could get the item that I needed to get. But there is more of that traditional stealth here, similar to other first-person stealth titles like a Dishonored that have that stealth aspect where you can stealth around from enemies, you can make noise over a distance by throwing a bottle or using the whip example that we used earlier to distract enemies, make them move in a certain direction and then sneak around them or take them out. You can pick up the bodies and move them around so that the enemies won't actually see them when they're traveling around as well. Now, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is set in 1937 after the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark, something that I didn't notice until I was literally watching the film. I was basically doing that pointing meme like at the screen, is that Marcus Brody from the game is also in the movies, obviously because he works there, but that never occurred to me that it was the same person, but it is. But you do start at the Marshall College, just like in Raiders, but the story will take you to different places. It does also take you to Egypt, interestingly, and I do 100% feel a lot of the Raiders of the Lost Ark energy in the game, but I'm sure we're going to get references to a lot of the other films as well. I'm curious if there'll be anything to do with Temple of Doom appear in the game. That's actually next on my rewatch list, so if I do see anything in that film that is relevant to the games, I'll probably talk about that in future Indiana Jones videos when we get closer to launch, because I do want to go through and rewatch all of the films. I don't know, maybe I'll skip the most recent Dial of Destiny movie. You guys might need to let me know in the comments if I should watch it or not, if you have seen it. But as this is quite an early part in Indiana Jones's lore or history, I suppose, I am very interested to know how much references or Easter eggs to events that are going to happen in the future or in the past there will be in this game, even of things that may have occurred recently in Raiders and then that will occur when we go back to Egypt or, as we're traveling around the world. But as a little bonus thing at the end here, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the attention to detail. Like watching the films, there is that like map flying transition where you're traveling to a new place. That's exactly the same in the game. When you're traveling to the Vatican, you see that same sort of transition effect where you see the arrow traveling across of Indy moving to different places on the world map. Marion also does make a reference in the game, like when Indiana Jones gets his journal at the start of the game. I'm not sure if they gave us footage of this in the preview, but that journal that you do get, that's actually from Marion, and it has a nice little note from her there as well. And then there's other details, like just the comical aspects of it, like Indy being afraid of snakes, like that's in the game. Like there's a moment, very funny comical moment where Indy needs to feed a snake as like these events are happening around him. It's got sort of a slapstick comedy vibe to it, which I do quite enjoy. It does feel very authentic to the films as well. But I am going to take some notes, I think, of a lot of the things that I see when rewatching the films, and if I notice anything in the game, so I might make a video after launch of maybe some Easter eggs or things that I've come across, because I think there's going to be a lot of cool things in this game and I'm quite excited for it. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Are you excited